Hi, hello, welcome. A few movies came out that I have not talked about yet. Most of them are on streaming. There's just not a lot that's coming out right now in the cinemas that I really want to see, except for some big blockbusters like Indiana Jones and Mission Impossible, which I will be talking about in this video. So there's a lot more on streaming that I have seen lately. So the movies I will be talking about right now are My Fault, Blood and Gold, Peter Pan and Wendy, Box Barcelona, and Mission Impossible That Reckoning Part 1. One thing I want to mention before I start is that I'm starting to give zero point 0.5 ratings, so basically just making these videos and not using the 5-star rating, instead using numbers, like for example Anthony Fantano is kind of changing the way I look at the ratings. So when I look at a letterbox rating, I kind of don't think about a 3.5-star rating the same way that I look at a 7 out of 10 rating, which it basically is. So that's already one thing that kind of made me change this a little bit up. Another thing that I kind of didn't really like is the fact that there's no 0 on letterbox, which I still don't really like. I would like there to be a 0 because some movies really deserve that. Also, a 5 out of 10 would be the exact middle. Like right now there's 10 ratings, so there's no exact middle. But when I have a 0.5 rating, there can be a little bit more of a middle ground. So a 5.5 would be a little bit more in the exact middle. When I give a movie a 5, it's more negative, and when I give it a 6, it's more positive. But sometimes there's movies, and especially in this video, there's a few where I really just feel the exact middle. I don't feel positive or negative towards the movie, so I kind of want to add something a little bit more to it. And also, if I give a movie, for example, a 5.5, it's still a bit more easy to translate into a letterbox rating. Just, I wanted to mention that. So starting off with the first movie, which is My Fault, or Culpa Mia in the original language title. Culpa Mia is a new Amazon original movie that is kind of following this trend of movies like After or 365 Days or 50 Shades of Grey, but with a teenage romance. And I'm keeping this a little bit short because I really don't know what else to say about this movie. But this movie is one of the worst movies this year. Maybe even the worst. The thing is, I went into this movie blindly. I did not know any of the directors or actors. The only reason why I watched this is because I got recommended it, saying this is a very fun, bad movie. But the thing is, the first half maybe of this movie was kind of fun because I watched it with a person. But that person fell asleep halfway through the movie, so I had to endure the rest of the movie by myself. And to be honest, this movie is not fun bad when you watch it alone. It's just bad. It's really fucking annoying. What's this movie about? It's about this girl, Noah. She lives with her mom, and her mom has a new boyfriend, and she moves in with her boyfriend, and so obviously Noah has to come with her. And in that house of this very rich boyfriend of her mom, there's also Noah's new stepbrother. And there's a romance between that stepbrother and her. And so it's basically this porn fantasy of stepbrother porn movies, but actually in a movie. And not good, definitely. Because to be honest, even though, a romance like that, I guess, could exist. I mean, it's not totally wrong because he is not the real brother of her, but still it's just awkward. And every single scene that is romantic between these two is first of all awkward because of the obvious, it's her stepbrother. But the second thing is also because he has this very bad boy attitude to him that just feels so stupid. I mean, it's so stupid. I really couldn't stand the way this is actually portrayed as something cool. It's like every single cliche of this type of romance, but like really taken seriously. Like they are not even self-aware of how bad this actually is and how stupid and how just awkward it feels. More towards the middle and the end of the movie, this movie actually turns into a criminal story, into an action movie that, it's just so pointless. The action is not good because you can really see the visual effects, but it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. If you think about it, it's way too much, and especially because the first half of the movie feels pretty normal. It's just about this romance, and then all of a sudden you have this weird plot of one character getting abducted, and there's this weird car chase in the end of the movie. I just can't explain how stupid that last scene was. It just was too much for me. So yeah, I don't want to talk about this movie a lot. I also don't really have a lot in mind anymore because it's just been some time since I've seen it, and it's a bad movie. I didn't want to remember a lot of it. What I can say is that it's just another one of these movies with this weird trend right now about romances that have some criminal backstory, a lot of dramatic music, a lot of very music video like lighting, and also very toxic relationships because this relationship just doesn't work at all. I think I thought that trend kind of ended because we already had 50 Shades of Grey, a whole trilogy. We already had 365 days movies and 4 after movies. But I realized that this is not really ending right now because this year only we had Perfect Addiction, and sometime in the future we are getting a fourth 365 days movie and a fifth after movie, and I think there's already a sixth in planning. So yeah, this trend is still not ending, and I am suffering. I don't want this anymore. If you actually want to see Culpa Mia, maybe do it if you actually have fun with this, but there's a lot of movies that have similar plots than this, just better. If you want to see a movie about racing and also some kind of romance in it, maybe just watch The Fast and the Furious. If you want to see this kind of weird stepbrother relationship romance story, but actually good or fun, then watch Clueless. And if you actually want to see a good toxic relationship romance drama in the veins of After or this movie, just watch Perfect Addiction. That's a movie that came out this year, and to be honest, this movie is the perfect type of ridiculous because it's also a sports movie, and those type of movies just kind of have a different feeling, and they can be very cliched, and that movie was actually fun. You had characters that you could actually kind of like. It was just a lot more fun, and this movie is not. This movie gets a 2.5 out of 10. So moving on to the next movie, Blood and Gold. So already this year we had a movie called Sisu that's about I think it's a Finnish movie about a guy killing Nazis in a very brutal way. And I haven't seen that movie, but I really want to. Still, I kind of got a replacement for that, and that is Blood and Gold. It's a new Nazi killing action comedy that's kind of like Inglourious Bastards. It's a German movie, and it came out on Netflix. So yeah, it's a very weird combination that I have not seen in this exact way before. But it's actually a recommendable movie. It's about this German World War II soldier who, towards the end of the war, gets dishonored from the army, and so he teams up with a woman and tries to take revenge with her. And while that happens, the troop that they are hunting is also searching for gold of a Jewish family that lived in the town where the woman came from. So yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, but very fun. The main good thing about this movie is definitely the action. It's creative, it's bloody, it's fun, it's well choreographed and well filmed. It's very entertaining to watch, and there's a lot of it. And there's a lot of action sequences that I just thought were very impressive and looked really, really good. And I haven't seen a lot of German action movies, so this is definitely a step up from Manta Manta this year, which was not good. But yeah, that was definitely something that I really enjoyed. It was almost the level of Extraction. Like, the fights were really, really intense. Also, one thing I like was the Western touch that they gave this movie. It's kind of, it has this very classic Italian Western music in it that just kind of adds something to it. And one thing that I kind of have to praise about this film is that it has a character with Down syndrome, and obviously those types of people are also not accepted by Nazis. But I never really saw people with disabilities during World War II in a movie. Most World War II movies are mostly obviously about Jews, which makes sense. In Inglourious Bastards, I remember there was one of the main characters was black, so that's also some kind of representation. But I never really seen people with disabilities in a World War II movie. And the fact that it's actually an actor with Down syndrome used in this movie, and the character also actually does stuff, like he's not just there to be a person with disability, he actually does stuff. I think that's like a great thing, and I just think that's something new that I really have not seen before. But other than that, I don't think this movie is, that impressive. Mostly I was just not as invested, sadly, in the characters. There was nothing objectively wrong that I saw about any of the characterizations of any of the characters, but I just wasn't invested. I was just always waiting for the next action sequence, which is kind of sad because this movie, there's a lot of work in this movie, and I think it's still a fun and impressively made movie, but I just wasn't as invested in the characters. And the main bad guy, who was played by Alexander Scheer, I just didn't like his performance at all. He was just kind of too much. I mean, this movie is already ridiculous, but it just is another level of ridiculous that I just could not get invested in. I couldn't take him seriously at all. But to be honest, this movie is a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed it for the most part, especially considering that this movie is directed by Peter Torwart. This guy made one of my least favorite horror movies ever, and least favorite action movies, and least favorite German movies, and least favorite Netflix movies, which is Blood Red Sky. I hated that movie so much. But this is definitely a huge step up. I give this movie a 6 out of 10. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Next movie is Peter Pan and Wendy. This is a new Disney movie that came out, a new Disney live action remake basically. The thing is, I did not really care about this movie at first. First of all, I didn't even know there was a Disney animated movie called Peter Pan. To be honest, like, I never really grew up with Disney, so this movie just didn't really exist for me. But I found that out after watching this movie. So there's also not a lot of nostalgia that I have with Peter Pan. The only thing that I saw about Peter Pan was Hook, which is the 1991, I think, Steven Spielberg movie featuring Robin Williams. And that movie I liked. I really loved that movie. It was a lot of fun. It was really well made. But yeah, still I didn't really get excited for this movie until I found out it was directed by David Lowery. David Lowery directed A Ghost Story, which I have not seen, but I've only heard a lot of good things about it. And it's still a movie that I really, really want to see, but I just can't find it anywhere. He also directed The Old Man and the Gun, which I really enjoyed. And he directed The Green Knight, which is a movie that is very impressive. And I can really see why a director like David Lowery, who made The Green Knight, would also make this movie. Because the best things about this film are probably because of him. Because this movie, just like The Green Knight, looks incredible. Even when the plot is kind of boring, the world is still immersive. There's a lot of great blends between VFX and real people who are in the shot. There's a lot of real locations and real sets. It just looks absolutely stunning. It's just technically incredibly well made. That's one thing I have to give this movie. It is such an immersive movie because everything seems real. And that's kind of the main thing that I really don't like about science fiction and fantasy movies these days. For example, Indiana Jones, just a few weeks ago, just kind of didn't impress me a lot because I wasn't invested in the action, because I saw a lot of things didn't look real. So that was definitely the best thing about Peter Pan and Wendy. And also one thing that this movie didn't do is that Neverland is kind of this very sad and boring place at this point, which in a way is probably a bit different from the original source material, but I think that's, you know, a good thing. Like, you have to kind of do something new with the source material if you make a remake. And so I appreciated this very sad look at how Neverland could look, and it actually made me care even more about the main characters, Hook and Peter Pan. But the main problem with this movie is also just, you know, the main characters, or generally all the characters. Peter Pan himself is charming, but kind of dull and doesn't really do a lot. He just kind of gets saved by Wendy a lot, and that's about it. I kind of cared for his arc a little, but not really. Captain Hook was easily my favorite character in the movie. I thought he was the perfect balance between evil and also having a lot of heart. This guy was just great, but the thing is that he didn't really get to have an arc towards the end, so his character was just kind of wasted in my opinion. And then there's Wendy, who was definitely the main character. It's not Peter Pan, it's definitely Wendy. She actually has an arc in this film, but she just kind of jumps from the beginning to the end of the arc. Like, in the beginning, she's kind of this person who doesn't really have a lot of imagination, so she meets Peter Pan so he can give her that and give her, you know, some happiness in her childhood, basically. At least that's what it seemed like, but then she just kind of doesn't struggle at all. And she just basically saves everyone for the whole movie. She doesn't really have any struggles at all. She isn't really in danger at all. And in the end, her arc is completed. That's it, basically. So I couldn't really get invested in her either, because she didn't really have anything that she struggled with, except for in the beginning when she was, you know, sad that she had to move. And that's it, basically, with interesting characters, because no other character was really memorable at all. Not even her brothers or anyone. They were just all there. So basically, it was a very beautiful looking and immersive world that they lived in, but none of the characters are really interesting to make this all worth it. And so I'll give this a 5.5. It's kind of right in the middle. I just didn't really care for it, sadly. Next movie is Box Barcelona. This is a new Netflix movie. Box Barcelona is basically a spin-off or sequel of the first Box, which is a movie that came out in 2018 on Netflix. And it's a movie I kind of enjoy. At least I enjoyed the concept of Box, because I actually think it's kind of scary. It's about something coming to the earth, and if you look at it, you kill yourself, because it's so horrible that you just can't do anything but kill yourself. Or if you are a crazy person, you kind of turn even more crazy and you survive, but you try to make everyone else look like it's something that either makes you kill yourself or be enlightened in a way. And that's basically the concept of the first movie. There was a lot of things that I really didn't like about it, sadly, because a lot of stupid character decisions, a lot of stupid deaths that just didn't really make sense at all. Even though they were cool deaths in itself, I just couldn't help but not be invested if everybody is completely stupid. And it has this very annoying editing style that constantly cut back and forth between the future and the past. And because you already see which characters are missing in the future, you are not invested in the past storyline because you know all of these people are probably going to die. So yeah, that was not a good movie. But this movie definitely took an interesting turn because again, I think the story, the main story and the main concept of Bird Box is actually pretty cool. And this movie starts with a main character who is already crazy. So we are basically following a crazy person and are seeing the mind of a person who is enlightened by whatever this is. And now he has this arc of finding people that he actually cares for, but he has this thing in his mind that wants him to kill all of these people, basically. A cool concept, but it's, again, just wasted, because this movie promises in its letterbox description that there's a new and even more sinister threat. But there's not. Basically, everything is just the same as in the first movie. The creatures are all the same. The characters are just as stupid and forgettable. Like, even when characters died, I really did not care. Either they died in a stupid way, or I just wasn't interested in them enough to actually care when they died. And even the stupid cutting back and forth editing style is in this movie again. Like, I don't have a problem with this style of telling a story at all. But in this movie, it's even more pointless. It's not taking away from the tension. It's kind of explaining more and more of the main character's backstory before he went crazy, which I guess is interesting. But to be honest, nothing that happens in these flashbacks are worth telling, because you can kind of piece it together if you just watch the main storyline. Like, for example, there's a main bad guy who is in a way responsible for the reason why he is crazy. But if this guy was a little bit more present in the main storyline, we would kind of get an understanding of his role in the life of our main character. There's even a flashback where we basically learn two things. One thing that we learn is the job of the main character, basically. And the second thing is that he knows German. I don't know why this flashback was even there, because his job, I couldn't really care less about his job, to be honest. And why do we have to know that he knows German? If he just starts talking German, I mean, we understand that he knows German. Why do we need a flashback to explain that he knows it? It's just completely pointless, and it's just a very useless waste of runtime that I really just didn't need. And yeah, that's basically it. So the only really good thing about this movie is definitely the main character. And his interesting concept that they had for his arc. But that's about it. And I gave this movie 4.5 out of 10, but I really feel like this movie just gets lost in my mind even more over time. And so, yeah, I'll probably change this to maybe, I think a 3 is okay. 3 out of 10. That's it, Box Barcelona. And now to my last movie. This is probably the most anticipated movie that I have from this list right here. And that's Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. But with this movie, I kind of want to keep it short because there's a Part 2. And I feel like I might change my opinion a lot on how I feel about this movie when I see the whole picture, when I see the whole 6 hours, and when I get a conclusion of what was built up in this movie. It's a new Mission Impossible movie, obviously, with Tom Cruise, who has been there since Part 1, and directed by Christopher McQuarrie, who is there since, I think, Part 5. So he directed Rogue Nation, he directed Fallout, and now this one. He also directed Jack Reacher, which is a different movie franchise with Tom Cruise, a movie I really didn't enjoy. I thought that movie was boring. But yeah, this movie is a new Mission Impossible movie, and I kind of appreciate this movie for doing something different, because it's not really trying to have as much extravagant action as, for example, Mission Impossible Fallout. This movie is much more grounded. There's a lot of character building, and they take a lot more time with it. But here's my main problem with this film, and that's basically that this movie is just kind of too convoluted for me. There's basically 2 or maybe 3 sides in this film, but there's so many characters that I at some point just really couldn't follow anything anymore. And I really mean that. I'm kind of bad with understanding movies sometimes, and I know that I have a problem with that in a lot of movies. There's very simple things that I sometimes don't get in movies, even though they are explained, but they just don't click with me. And that just makes me not really enjoy things like these as much. I mean, the plot itself is pretty good. I like that they took their time with it, that they took 3 hours to tell the story. If you have so many characters, you kind of need this much time to develop everything, but it was just kind of too much. There's the good guys, then there's the bad guys, and then there's the good guys, but they are separate from our good guys, and then there's separate people in that separate team of good guys. It's just kind of too much at some point. The action in this movie is good. There's not as much in it, because again, there's a lot of more talking in this film. I liked a lot of the humor in the first half. There's an action scene in Italy that I thought had a little bit too much humor, that really just seemed like a comedy, but it just didn't hit my sense of humor a lot. Towards the end, there was this action scene in the train. Some parts of it kind of looked fake, which I am kind of disappointed again, because this had such a high budget, but for the most part I was really invested in it. But yeah, for the most part I thought this movie was good. I was always interested in what was happening, but a lot of times I just couldn't follow, and the action just was not as extravagant as in the movies that came before, which I don't want to fault this movie for, but that's just what made this movie not as enjoyable for me as some of the other Mission Impossible movies. So I think they are holding back for the next part. I don't think they are putting everything on the table already. I think they just kind of want a lot of build up for the next movie, and the next movie is either going to be a banger or it's a continuation of this very slow paced way of storytelling. Both of them I would appreciate, but I'm just kind of hoping for a little bit more action and a little bit less of this very convoluted storyline. So yeah, I give this movie a 6.5 out of 10. I enjoyed it. It was my favorite Mission Impossible movie. That probably still goes to Mission Impossible Fallout, but it's a good movie. And of these 5 movies in this video, definitely the best one. So thank you for watching and see you next time.